Before I begin my story, I'll give you a quick summary of the location where this happened. At my middle school, in the older half of the building, built in the 1950s at some point, all the classrooms have little windows next to them. My reason for bringing this up is a horrifying event that took place during my 5th hour class today, involving one of these said windows. I walked into the classroom and set my stuff down, preparing to ask the boy next to me, named Cameron, if he had a pencil. I was about to start asking. I heard a loud smacking sound, followed by a crunch, followed by a shattering type noise, sort of like when you drop a box of pencils or markers. All of a sudden, I was deafened by screams of shock and agony. My classmates were now in the hall, shocked by something just barely out of my line of sight. I walked into the hallway. Being on the shorter end of the height spectrum, I had to shove my way to the front of the group. What I saw next will haunt my dreams for the rest of my life. I saw a girl rolling around on the floor, smearing blood on the dirty linoleum tiles. At first, I couldn't tell what had happened, but I got the picture after a few seconds. The girl was a special needs student. After being rejected by a boy in her class, she went completely ballistic, and without thinking, had punched one of the windows next to a neighbouring classroom's door. There was broken glass and blood everywhere. The classroom next to ours is vacant, and nobody was in there at the time of the incident. After about 10 minutes, the teachers got the situation calmed down. The girl was completely batshit and tried to fight the man who came to help her. The school ended up going into a lockdown. She had to go to hospital, and even though nobody really knew her, she was in 7th grade and we were in 8th. We were all in legitimate shock by the horrible scene. I really hope that she's getting the help she needs, and hope she doesn't have a fistful of glass shards. I've seen some crazy shit at my school, but that might be the most fucked up thing I've ever seen there.
We wanted to have a good time together, my girlfriend and I. You see, she's a nurse and has to work the night shift. The hospital she works at requires about 5 years of experience before you can even think of working on day shift. This wouldn't be such a problem, but I work as a marketer. I have a typical 9 to 5 in an office, and it's really tough finding time for each other. Our sleep schedules are chaotic, to say the least. So, when Valentine's Day rolled around on a day and a night that we were both working, we got really frustrated. It's really hard to explain how you feel like you're being cheated out of time. Like there isn't going to be a moment you can just sit down and truly enjoy your relationship for what it is. But, we decided that we were going to let our lame schedule get the best of us. We decided that we'd visit a city for a weekend away. Valentine's Day fell on a Thursday, but we figured having a little trip that weekend would be the next best thing. Maybe even better. She's been really adamant about visiting Oak Ridge in Tennessee. Her grandfather worked there back in the day, and it's always been an interest to her. She's always telling me these facts about how creepy it is, and how she just has to go one day. It's roughly an 8-hour drive from where we live, so we made a deal about driving. I was going to drive the entire way there, and she was going to drive while we were actually in the city. She totally got the good deal of the bargain, but that's just what you do when you care for your girlfriend. But something strange happened. Something has tainted my memory ever since that time. When I think back and remember that weekend away, I'm not thinking about us cuddling up on the couch, or any of the fun places we got to visit there either. So, we got there Friday night. She mostly slept in the car, but still felt really tired. She told me she'd be able to sleep that night and be awake and normal for the next day, so that's just what we did. And it was really a great day. We got to visit the Eye Museum and learn about the Manhattan Project. Even got to visit the plant where her grandfather used to work. At least we're pretty sure. He's deceased now, but the tour guide said that this is where the majority of the work on the bobs were done, and apparently he worked on them. Anyway, the day was great, but it didn't last very long. By the time it was dark, we were out of ideas for things to do, and quite frankly, out of energy. We decided to visit our favorite fast food joint, Wendy's. Please don't judge us. And she was driving as we made our way there. It was only a 10 or 15 minute drive. She had her music on, I was just kind of looking out the window. At one point, a blue Mustang was beside our car. We were stopped at a red light, and I looked out the window and peered into theirs. I saw a very old man. He looked unhappy. Miserable, even. His skin looked unnaturally pale. I'm not sure when he started, but he was just staring at me. It wasn't until I looked into the car that I noticed it either. Not going to lie, it did kind of freak me out. We made eye contact for about 5 seconds, and then for the briefest of moments, he smiled. But it was so fast. It must have been a split second that his mouth went to a smile and then back into a frown. It was the strangest thing I've ever seen. I looked over at my girlfriend and she didn't notice at all. She was jamming out to Bohemian Rhapsody. The lights turned green and we were in motion again. I didn't take my eyes off of that car for the rest of that ride. At least, until they turned. That's not the craziest part. You see, it gets even weirder. We were planning on leaving Monday morning, and so Sunday night we went out to eat, but this time to an actual restaurant. We weren't feeling fast food again, so we looked on Google and found a local restaurant that had pretty decent reviews. I had my favorite food, deep fried chicken, so off we went. I had completely forgotten about that strange man I saw in the car. But about halfway through my meal, I noticed him again. This time, he was in the restaurant. He was staring at me. I know he was. When I noticed, he did that exact same facial movement. Just the way I remembered. He went from a miserable frown in a split second. He was smiling only for his face to be frowning again in that next instant. I'm not sure my reaction was warranted. He hadn't actually done anything wrong to me, and I was just enjoying a nice meal with my girlfriend, which is why it was so strange for my fight or flight to kick in and I went up and confronted him. He was sitting at a booth alone. I asked him why he was looking at me, but to my absolute surprise, he never said a word. He just sat there and frowned at me. I asked him what his problem was, and that was before my girlfriend told me it was time, and we headed home. She knows I can get a little worked up and wanted to avoid a confrontation. "It's not illegal to look at people," she said. Still, though, it was something about that man that made me feel so strange. We were about an hour into the car ride home and she was asleep again. And, you guessed it. You totally fucking guessed it. I saw this freaky old man again, but this time it was way worse. For starters, he was driving a totally different car. I don't know what this guy's life was like, but I can imagine what you have to do to be able to afford a Mustang and still have enough money to drive a second car. And to make matters even worse, he happened in the left lane as if he was going to pass me, but he didn't. He just passed me for about a mile. I noticed that there wasn't a car next to me, and it wasn't even until I looked over to flip the bird that I recognized him. It was a creepy old man. But he wasn't frowning anymore. That smile that he'd only been mustered for a split second was now permanently stained on his aged face. It was the most horrifying thing I've ever seen in my life. Suddenly, he turns his head forward and aggressively veers his car into my direction. Reflexively, I slam the brakes and swerve off to the side of the road. My girlfriend is shaken awake, and all we can see is this vehicle speeding off in the distance through a cloud of dirt. My heart was racing like crazy, and by the time I could process my girlfriend screaming, asking me what the hell was going on, I started to feel myself choke up. We discussed whether we should waste our time calling the police, but I was so scared. The best course of action seemed to be to get out of the godforsaken town as fast as possible. The rest of the ride home happened without incident, and I haven't seen him since. Needless to say, That was the least romantic and the most insane Valentine's Day ever.
Happy first anniversary, read the obnoxious pink cursive on the teddy bear's stomach. I could only assume it was a bear. White stuffing extruded from the hole where its head should have been. I sat and considered the decapitated plush animal. Its purple body was intermittently stained with mud. I discovered it on my desk after teaching an evening class. Like so many of my students, this messy little guest did not attend my office hours today. Someone delivered it quite recently. At the risk of sounding vain, I get a few Valentine's gifts from students. Most are given as benign flattery. Some are more serious. I always keep a careful, oh so careful, account of which students may respond well to extra attention. I am diligent in vetting prospective liaisons. While what happens between two consenting adults is purely up to them, the university would frown on such rendezvous. It may not surprise you to learn that I am a persistent bachelor. That was why the reference to an anniversary was troubling. I have no such conceivable attachment to anything, unless someone was making a morbid reference to last year's indiscretion, but no one could possibly know about that. Perhaps the two instances have the same progenitor, blackmail. I'll admit the nastiness last year was due to oversight on my part. Katie was a senior that, in retrospect, was too receptive to my probes and cues. It was a rare mistake to conflate the youthful exuberance I'm attracted to with greedy over-eagerness. We met a few times, and in short order, she started demanding better grades, lest she bring our relationship public. I resigned to bide my time until the year was out. When she started requesting money, I knew it would never end. Katie assured me that no one knew about our arrangement, and she was true to her word. After she disappeared, I wasn't even identified as a suspect. Valentine's Day, the anniversary of her disappearance, was approaching. Someone knew. I was sure of it. The thought festered in my head, as surely as Katie festered in the ground. Could it be I was under the scrutiny of the authorities? Were they trying to invoke an emotional response? Despite myself, I felt compelled to check on her. I rented a car, fearing mine was bugged, and drove down random country roads, only to trudge through slush into irrelevant forests. I waited at each for hours in case I was followed. Only then did I return to Katie's resting place. I found the earth turned up. There were no mounds of dirt, no shovel marks in the half-frozen earth, just the ground hewn open as if from below. I heard stiff shuffling in the slush and mud behind me. I froze. The purple head of a stuffed bear. Oh, it was a bear, was thrown down at my feet. Still, I did not turn. I heard a cold, vengeful, familiar voice rasp out behind me. Professor.
This happened on Valentine's Day of this year. I am a male, age 32, and I went to this kind of speed dating event. I have always been awkward, as I am autistic, and my family kept me sexually repressed, as I am gay and in a strict Christian family who disapprove of both my sexuality and lack of faith, and that will come into play. But back to the story. While at the event, I had found a date. The event came to a close when another guy who was at the same event walks up to Alex and I, but stops, well still a good distance away, and says, "So you guys think you are fast?" Alex and I just kept walking until he points at us and says, "You handholders, you think you are fast?" And we stop, and Alex looks at him and just tilts his head in confusion. And I respond, "Dude, you just got out of a gay dating session," when the guy yells, "You know what I'm talking about, Joseph." We both step back. "You will be judged by God for your dark ways, reprobate." Taken aback by this, and after a shy laugh, telling him I am not Joseph. Then ask if my parents put him up to this due to his rather unique insult. He then walks up with heavy and aggressive steps, yelling odd homophobic slurs, looking absolutely deranged, and I pull out a knife I always carry and look him in the eye. "Back off. I have no idea who you think I am, but you have the wrong person." Then the guy abruptly stops and just points at me saying, "God is judging you, and that cannot save you from him." I look back at Alex and just walk to the car, keeping him in my sight while we both get in the car and drive away. After getting out of the parking lot, I give a sigh of relief and ask Alex where we should go for dinner, and Alex looks at me laughing and says, "You can't be serious. After what just happened, that is the first thing you say?" I shrug. We did just get to know each other, and I mean, come on, we just got away from some arsehole. We cannot let him win. And to be honest, I kinda need a drink. What a way to kick off a relationship. We went to a date that was very close to my place of work, and I went to ask our security personnel if I should have called the cops, but he told me the same thing I hear from so many of these stories, in that he had not committed any crime, and he could just leave as this was outdoors. I just hope whoever Joseph is never encounters this madman.